guys. By the end of this tutorial, we're going to wind up with something that looks like this, depending on how many scans you took and everything. So what I've done is I've already processed all these pieces, and if you look at the poly groups, every color is basically a different scan set. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I had 9 separate scans for this. So I just went through it, reprocessed a lot of it, and sort of switched around the sizes. I think the hand here was probably the size of, well, all of this. So I just scaled them all down and made them sort of fit, and just used my other scan data as references. The poly count for all of this is 6.7 million. And I mean, before I remeshed it and fixed up the topology, the hand alone was 9 million. And I couldn't import each scan directly from Agisoft. For instance, you can see that right through the torso here, it's sliced. So I actually had to go into Agisoft and cut off these points, sort of export an OBJ just at the top half, and then the bottom half, and then kind of line it back up in ZBrush, because each one here was I think a little bit over 2 gigabytes, so that's more than my computer can handle. And what I like to do is just sort of kit bash it. Like, I pick pieces that I like. So, and mind you, this is all still really rough. So the hand here, it's not bad, right? I mean, obviously you have to do like a lot of cleanup here and take off some of the stuff and smooth it out, but the size is okay, right? And the rough detail. And I have a lot of duplicates too, like the legs and stuff here. Like, for instance, probably will pick maybe this thigh here, move it over, smooth it out, and start blending them. If you look around here, like the back of the legs here are a lot nicer, and this just didn't process at all. I got a barefoot scan as well as one with a shoe on, so later on, depending on what I want to use it for. Right? Yeah, so I basically processed each piece, and then I import them all into the one file and line them up. So I'm just going to walk you through the process that I go to process each piece, and then we can sort of start bashing them together. And I don't know how many scans you have or what you're doing, but this is the general process that I have every time. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through the foot scan here. So here's the data that I have and what it looks like. It can be kind of laggy with the textured view on, so when you want to navigate around, if your computer isn't that powerful, just click on point cloud. And you'll get something like this, and you can sort of switch the views really quickly. But all I'm going to do is click on the lasso tool, or kind of grab all these points like that, and just go through and start deleting them all. But don't do it in the point cloud mode, because it doesn't really help your final mesh. So you got to go into the model or the textured mode, and it's kind of slow for me. Like, I'm holding down the mouse now, and you'll see like a red line appear eventually. Yeah, so you kind of just go around like this and start chopping out all of the excess geometry that you don't want. So I'm going to pause the video right here and just sort of clean it up and check back in with you guys. After chopping off some of the excess mesh, here's what I'm left with. I know it's not perfect, and there's like a square around it and a few things out around here, but I find Agisoft really slow to work with, and this is just for rough cuts, so I just try to remove as much as I can so I can get it into ZBrush, and then we can clean up in around here. But if you prefer to take out all the geometry you can here, then by all means go ahead. So after you have it cleaned up to a point that you're happy with, just click on File, Export Model, and just save it wherever. Foot example. At this point, just open up ZBrush and you just want to import the OBJ you just made. So foot example, load. This part can be kind of slow sometimes, depending on how big your mesh is, and it's definitely really slow for me. So I'm just going to pause the video real quick and check back in. If after you import it, you see nothing like this, don't really worry about it. The scale is always really messed up. So just hold down Alt, click anywhere on the canvas, and just start dragging around to look at it, or to look for it. So I can see it's here, pretty huge. Let's see. Yeah, so it's pretty massive. It's 6.5 million. At this point, the first thing I like to do is just turn on double. I've got to put up here on my hotbar. If you don't have a custom UI like I do, I think it's down here in display options, visibility. Display properties, double. Yeah, so you just go down there and click that. If you notice too that you have a little, like your cursor is coming on both sides of the screen, that's symmetry, so just hit X and that will go away. It can kind of cause a few problems while we're working at this stage. So at this point, I just try to line it up the best I can. So just hit W for move, click anywhere on it. Okay, that's good enough. At this point, I don't really care about how large the object is. I just try to fix the orientation, because as long as the objects are all relatively the same size, then I can like fix them all up when they're in the same file. But if you have like a different purpose, like you want to print things to scale for 3D printing and stuff, another thing you can do is just import some kind of reference object that you know is, say, 6 inches, and start scaling your objects relative to that. Yeah, so the next part, I like to just to load the textures in, and ZBrush does this really strange thing where it inverts all the textures. So I'm just gonna show you how to fix that really quick. So just go into Texture, Import, Foot Example. So originally it's upside down, and I'll show you what it looks like now. Yeah, so when you apply your texture, it just looks like this crap. But all you have to do is click on Texture, load your example and say flip vertical. Go over here and just load it up again, right? And then it looks fine. It doesn't really matter to you. Another thing I like to do is go into the shader. I like to just pick a shader that looks a little closer to what I want it to look like, right? So I'm probably going to bring it into Photoshop and just adjust the colors a little bit later on till it looks something like this. And the next thing you want to do is take the texture and turn it into poly paint. So all you have to do is say poly paint from texture up here. Oh, and make sure that you have a sculpting brush on, not your move tool. So anything, just click anything here. Well, maybe not that. We'll just say clay buildup. And then just say poly paint from texture. All right, turn this on. One more time. Okay. Also, if you don't have this put up here, just click on poly paint, and it's right here. Poly paint from texture. Okay. So at this point, you don't have to worry about the texture interfering. You just have a really large model, and I'm okay with that. So just go into Subtools, Duplicate. And this is the part where this is why we're always cutting down the mesh, because if your computer can't handle the full file plus a duplicate and it crashes, you just have to go back and work with it again. So if you've cut as much as you can in Agisoft, you might have to just start slicing through the leg and import it twice and then join it back together later. But this is the entire purpose of us always like cutting off the excess mesh. So all I do now is I just turn off one of them, turn off the visibility, and then you just want to, I Dynamesh it first, right here, and that's in geometry, I think, Dynamesh. So you're going to want to Dynamesh it first, which will close some of the holes and make the mesh a little bit better to work with, and then you want to remesh it, so that's Z remesher, and you just click that once. So we'll do that now. Another thing is make sure that your resolution is really low. I set mine to 64 because this can be really taxing on your computer. So let's click it. My ZBrush just crashed on me, so that's why the orientation isn't lined up anymore. So I forgot to mention, after every single stage, just save it. Save it a ridiculous amount of times because in all likelihood ZBrush will crash on you because these files are so huge. But anyways, here's the Dynamesh version. You can see the top is closed, so is the bottom. It's only about 500, 600,000 polygons, and the original is about 6.5 million or so. But you'll notice that it no longer has a texture. Okay, so all you want to do is click the visibility on your old one, and it should look like this. And provided that it's poly paint, which we did here, poly paint from texture, all you want to do now is say project all. So go down into geometry. Maybe it's not geometry. I find the ZBrush layout so tedious that if I ever find what I'm looking for once, I just drag and drop it on the top and kind of never use it again, so bear with me. Okay, so go into Subtool, click on Remesh, and then there's a Project option. And it's right here, Project All. And that's what I put up here. So make sure the visibility is turned on your original, and that you're actually on your Dynameshed version. And then you just say Project All. And it should give you a prompt if you have Polypaint on your original that it wants to cover, that it wants to copy the Polypaint as well. And you're going to say yes on that. When you're trying to lower the poly count and keep all your texture and mesh quality, a good way to check is just zoom in on your model and switch back and forth. So this is the low poly count, switch to the high. You can see that it carried a lot more detail. So all you have to do is just go into divide. So geometry, click on divide. And now your poly count is 2.4 million as opposed to 500,000. We can reduce this later when we turn all the Polypaint back into textures. But right now, this is a good way of preserving all the data. And then just click visibility on again, and then project all. At this point, I don't really see any significant difference in detail between the two models. So all I do now is just take the scan data, the larger one, and just delete it. And now what I'm left with is a model that instead of 6.5 million is 2.4. And it moves a lot quicker because I think that it has several subdivision levels. So there's 2. Okay. And at this point, it's just like a little judgment call. If you're okay with working with this for now, then just do that. But if you need to smooth out the mesh even more, what you can do is just duplicate it again, and then go down to Z Remesher, which I believe is in geometry. Yeah, it's right here, Z Remesher. So right now I'm fine with this. I'm able to move it around my screen, and I'm at the point where I just want to move on to my next piece. So all I'm going to do now is just mask out some of the excess, clean it up slightly, and just move on to the next piece until I have just a little kit bash of files I can work with. I don't really spend too much time or concern myself with having really pretty topology to begin with, because it's just going to be a rough in. Once you have all the pieces here together and we start dynameshing them together, like the leg to the hips, torso, head, and we're moving it all together, and we have like a pretty big file, then we'll get into like remeshing it and making it flow a little bit better. But in my opinion, it's not really worth it just yet, because you'll remesh it and then you'll have to dynamesh it again later. So all I really do at this point is just grab the masking lasso, and turn Dynamesh off. There we go. Yeah, so at this point it's good enough. Just go into Tools, Save As, and then foot example. Well, that's mine anyways. And there we go. And then we just move on piece by piece. And at the end, you should have something like this. So all that work we just did was just on that leg part there. And I just did the process over and over again for the hand. Each piece here, there's 3 pieces here. Legs, torso. So now we have our tools to work with. And as we move on, we're just gonna kind of pick the best pieces of each one and start merging them together, sculpt it a little bit and smooth it out, and just try to further refine it. So we'll go through some of that in the next one, and I'll see you guys later.